Hello and welcome back to Portland Cocktail Week Distance Learning. This is day 3 of classes in a row. So if you've been here for Monday class, Tuesday class, all of the above, thanks for coming back and joining us again. Very exciting day today. Also, like if it wasn't a copyright infringement, I feel like we would have to queue up yesterday from Boys to Men because this is our last public class of this round of the Scotch Whiskey Diploma. But we are hard at work trying to bring you more rounds of this very same program in 2023. So do not fret. Today, I am actually joined by, I have a new guest I'm very excited about. I do have Cameron George, the U.S. National Ambassador for Ardbeg, David Blackmore, the Global Ambassador for Ardbeg and Glenmorangie, and also TJ Littlejohn, the Global Engagement and Experience Manager for Ardbeg. And for this class, we are really bringing the cocktail train into the station. Today on Ardbeg Cocktails from the Hearth, we are going to talk Peaty cocktails. They are back in a big way. And Cam and David and TJ are here to help you learn a little bit about how to play in the smoke. So before we get started, I am going to tell you the same things I always tell you because that's part of my script. Number 1, make sure you like us here on Facebook. We have classes like this all the time, and they're super cool. And if you like the page, then you'll know about it. So do that. If you're more of a YouTube person, head on over to youtube.com/pdxcw, hit the little bell, subscribe. It's usually fun. I promise I don't host every class. There are other people, so there's more to look forward to than seeing my face 3 days a week. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. That's where you can keep up with everything we have coming up. So you can set a little calendar reminder for the classes that you're most excited about seeing. And make sure that you comment below, ask all of your questions, and especially our Scotch Whiskey Diploma students, make sure you check in and let us know that you're here because this is the last thing we're going to be counting attendance for. So you've made it this far. Don't ruin it now. I'm very excited for you all to take your final assessments, but first, Cam and David and TJ are going to show us how to make all of the Ardbeg cocktails to get us through final assessment week. So take it away, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. It is wonderful to be back on the airwaves and joined by 2 of my favorite people on the entire planet. Oh, I should change that. One of my favorite people, TJ, thank you very much. It's great to have you over here. David, as always, it's a pleasure to see and share space with you. No, just kidding. You're one of my favorites as well.
I love you too, Cam.
So I'm super excited to talk about cocktails and cocktail applications with Ardbeg. Oftentimes, you hear in the cocktail world that smoke has no place. And I just don't necessarily believe that to be true. I think that smoke is having this day in the sun, if you will, even a renaissance period, kind of people falling in love with smoky flavors from around the world, whether it's, obviously heavily peated single malts, whether it's mezcals or using tinctures with lapsang souchong. You're starting to see smoke be incorporated into cocktails in some really, really beautiful ways. And at Ardbeg, we try to speak about smoke not necessarily as one specific flavor profile, but as having 5 different families wrapped up and kind of raveled into that category. So at Ardbeg, we oftentimes speak about that when you're nosing a glass of whiskey or nosing a glass of anything smoky, that it should have 5 general applications, that there may be something maybe a little bit herbal, there may be something a little bit cold driven, maybe something savory, maybe something a little woody, and then something that also is a little sweet as well on the nose. Maybe even a little bit medicinal, right? So those are the kind of overarching flavor profiles that you'll see not only in some of the cocktails that we'll make today, but that'll actually be the underpinnings of everything that we make at Ardbeg, right? It's not just smoke for the sake of smoke. There's a whole universe to be explored underneath that one term there. TJ, you have been in the cocktail world for quite some time, so I'm super excited to get your thoughts on some of the cocktails that we've made in the past and some of the wonderful things to come from Ardbeg as well. TJ, you joined us pretty recently. Where did you come from, and what were you doing before joining on at Ardbeg?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's like an absolute pleasure. If you can't tell by my accent, I am Scottish, and I'm actually coming to you from the Ardbeg Global Head Office based here in Edinburgh as well. So it's really exciting to be on live with Cameron and David. I'm really fortunate to join. I've been in for about 2.5 months now, so I'm really fresh into Ardbeg itself. Obviously, the brand I've loved for such a long time. I've loved peated whiskies for a very long time, but I spent my time as a whiskey ambassador for another drinks company. I won't say who, but a very large drinks company, a very large whiskey portfolio for the last 4 years. And then prior to that, I was a cocktail bartender. So my whole entire world was based around Scotch whiskey cocktails, the modernization of Scotch whiskey, and moving in that direction. So coming on and being on camera with these guys who are really at the forefront of pushing the boundaries of Scotch whiskey is so important for us to keep us alive and move into the new generations. Some of the drinks that Cameron and David have made have been absolutely phenomenal. I'm always looking forward to seeing what they're going to come up with next.
You know, it is, that's one of the things we've tried to provide is resources, right? Because here in the States, oftentimes we can't take trips over to Scotland and be at the distillery 24/7. And so it's about trying to make the spirit profile come to life through the format or through the story of a cocktail. And so one of the things that we've done here in the States is we've actually created a list of cocktails, a cocktail compendium, if you want to call it that, there as well. That whiskey, the spirit of possibility.com. And you can actually see a lot of the work that myself, Dan Crowd, David Blackmore, and some of our other ambassadors, and also some bartenders from around the world have done in creating some beautifully smoky and also some very Glenmorangie-esque cocktails as well. But I have an affinity for the heavily peated ones myself. David, thank you very much for pushing the ball across the finish line with the whiskey, the spirit of possibility.com. Yes. Do you have any favorites from the cocktail list?
I'm not sure if it's not the greatest answer, but I'm not sure if I actually do have any favorites. They're all great. It just depends just like the whiskeys themselves, it depends what mood you're in, who you're with, where you are. You know, it's such a flavor is such a personal thing. That's the fun of it all. You know, that's where, from my background of not really being a bartender, but being involved in Scotch whiskey, I think there's so much in common though, because what we do at Ardbeg is all driven by flavor and creating interesting new flavor experiences. And that is exactly what motivates bartenders, from what I've seen anyway. So it's the same world. Just our drinks take 10 or more years usually to concoct, which you might not have your customers still standing at the bar if your cocktail took 10 years to make. A slightly different timescale, but it's the same idea, you know. If I was to pick something, and Cam, you're going to like this answer, I do like an Ardbeg daiquiri, I have to say. I really do. The daiquiri, and then for a different occasion completely, I'm a big fan of an Ardbeg Bloody Mary, massively. So Bloody Caesar as well. Our colleagues and friends up in Canada introduced me to the Ardbeg Bloody Caesar a few years back.
The Caesar's Clamato juice, right?
It is, yeah, Clamato juice, which sounds repulsive, but it's actually delicious. Yeah, I have to say, I once made an Ardbeg Bloody Mary with Ardbeg Supernova, and received several death threats online for it. But there we go.
I actually have a feeling that that is probably our world at the moment, and part of it. That if you're not getting abuse for making single malt cocktails, you're not doing it right, because there is a lot of the traditions out there, I think being Scottish and growing up in that world, I grew up in a whiskey household. My father drinks whiskey, and he always said, and I always made this joke, he drinks it from the bottle. No. He drinks it as it comes from the bottle via a glass. Yeah. And I think one of the big things about Scotland is we are huge advocates for Scotch whiskey, but we're even bigger advocates for telling you what you shouldn't do with it. Don't mix it. Don't add water. Don't chill it down. Don't add ice. We never tell you, hey, throw it in a bloody Caesar and have a great time on that Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And I think that's the world
TJ,
we're moving.
You're so right, and I've seen the change come to Scotland as well now with bartenders such as yourself. You know, the wave of talented Scottish bartenders who get it, kind of bringing that message to Scotland. But to be honest, you know, I've seen the whiskey boom happen since the beginning of my ambassadorial career, and in the early days, it was tough enough to even get people to drink single malt Scotch, let alone the idea of putting it in a cocktail. And as those opinions changed, I think sadly one of the last places in the world to get on board was actually Scotland, from my estimation. And it's great to see that it's got there too. And you know, my last couple of trips back to Edinburgh, wow, the cocktail scene in Edinburgh is off the charts. Amazing. Highly recommend people to come visit.
I feel like the cocktail scene was always good here. But really, the last couple of years, it's really stepped its game up, and it is one of the global leading things. You know, when Tales of the Cocktail came to visit, and Tales on tour, Edinburgh was the first stop. That really put Edinburgh on the map, and everyone in Edinburgh went, "Hold on a minute, let's pull our socks up. We've got work to do here," which was great. You know,
really did,
I think that's like you say, Scotland being massive advocates for Scotch whisky, but always telling you exactly how not to drink it. Whereas, actual fact, this is how I drink wee beastie. Now, I've actually used Corrie Vrecken tonight because yesterday, 2 days ago, I finished my wee beastie and I thought, well, I can open the one that's behind me, but actually, I had an open Corrie Vrecken. And this is a real simple highball, loads of ice, an ounce and a half of Corrie Vrecken, and I've topped it up with probably around about 5 ounces of cloudy lemonade and then put a squeeze of orange in there.
Nice.
And that real nice, fresh zestiness, and I think the Ardbegs, a lot of them hold on to this really interesting citrusness. As Cam mentioned, a lot of them have this herbaceous smoke, that sort of green smoke that then can turn over into citrus really, really easily, and that's why that's one of my favorite go-tos. But wee beastie, I'm using San Pellegrino Limonata, which I'm sure is available in the States, but probably not everywhere, but a nice cloudy lemonade, or I put a squeeze of a lemon in, a little bit of sugar and some soda water, a bit like a Collins, and it is absolutely perfect. That's exactly how I like drinking it.
It sounds great, TJ. And for me, Corrie Vrecken has this spice to it as well. And you're right, it's that kind of green herbal smoke. So the spice on Corrie Vrecken, as I've spent the last few years living in Texas and experiencing new foods and such like down here, it makes me think of certain types of like green chilies or hatch green chilies, fresh. It's just, we've just finished the hatch green chili harvest here.
I've taken a sip of that. There's this real nice barbecue that comes through on it. And a real big punch of licorice, actually, which is something I've never noticed before that comes through in Ardbeg. You know, it's and really a flavour that I don't enjoy, but when I mix it, that's a really, really good starting drink and something I love.
Funny about flavours that you don't necessarily like by themselves, that when in a cocktail, and I see Cam nodding there as well, for me, pineapple, I can't abide pineapples, but the flavour of pineapples, when it comes through in a whiskey or comes through in a whiskey cocktail, it is one of the things I look for and I absolutely love. Don't ask me to explain how I have those two thoughts.
There's no way that you're going to tell me you don't like an Ardbeg 10-year-old French martini.
No, that sounds good to me. Yeah,
I definitely love that. I'm a big fan of the French martini cocktail as well, and especially you make it smoky. You've won my heart right there for sure. TJ, you said something really interesting about the kind of core underpinnings of Ardbeg a few minutes ago, which was that each of the whiskeys from Ardbeg have this kind of green smoke that lends itself to citrus really well, both lemon and lime. I personally, when I'm talking about Ardbeg 10-year-old, more often than not, I am pulling for lime juice as the citric component whenever I'm making Ardbeg 10 cocktails. There's just this really beautiful waxiness and kind of even like the peel and the pith of lime coming from Ardbeg 10 that I see very, very readily accessible. When I move into something like Wee Beastie, for instance, Wee Beastie, I start to now gravitate to lemon. I can't tell you exactly why it is. Generally I feel like maybe sherried whiskeys tend to lend themselves to lemon, maybe even orange as a citric component a little bit more, I guess, graciously than they lend themselves to lime. But yeah, I've always found that very interesting about Ardbeg, that even though it is, yes, heavily peated and the most heavily peated whiskeys in regular production, there is always kind of a citric element that lends itself to making some really beautiful shaken or even citrus garnished cocktails as well.
I think things like the brand new smoke trails that's just been launched, the Global Travel, that's a Manzanilla cask finish. I've tasted it by itself and it is absolutely phenomenal. One of the perks of the job is tasting some brands before they're actually released. And I simply went, you know what? I really, really would like to make a white lady with that.
Yeah.
That triple sec, that citrus, egg white, touch of sugar to pull through. And I went, that's exactly where that drink sits. And it's so interesting because it is punchy on smoke. That peat is really prominent, but actually how that citrus works really, really well would work, Talking about Ardbeg daiquiris, when you say using 10 with lime, taking that sugar out and then using Cointreau and making a margarita style is something that's really up my street. And that's the way I gravitate to. And I'm forever drinking Ardbeg 10-year-olds in a Negroni. So not a Boulevardier, the ratios are different, with a pinch of salt on there.
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
That's the one. That's the one. And I for my own reasons, on my flavor profile, never liked bitter until about a year and a half ago. So Campari was out for me. And now I swear that drink is the drink that I am now known for. I'd be walking like, yeah, he's going to have one of those. If someone puts one down in front of me, I have absolutely no issues drinking that.
Yeah.
Before dinner, after dinner, in a nightclub, I'll drink that, no problem.
Breakfast time, whenever.
Responsibly. At breakfast.
You've hit another one of the talking points on my mental checklist of things that we need to discuss, and David will have some amazing thoughts on this as well. But as a bartender, one of the things that we obsess about is making sure that we make the most delicious cocktails that we possibly can that also elevate specific elements of a whiskey or the base spirit that we're trying to communicate, right? So in a way, cocktails are about, yes, making something that is innovative and beautiful by itself, but that also elevates the DNA of whatever the raw ingredient was, right? Whether it was whiskey, gin, tequila, mezcal, cognac, whatever it may be. So with Ardbeg smoke trails and also some of the other Ardbegs from the core range as well, each of those whiskeys tells their own story, but it also elevates the core underpinnings of the distillery, meaning that you always know that you're drinking an Ardbeg. Somehow deep in our, in our brains, whenever we're smelling or tasting a glass of Ardbeg, whether it be Ugadal or Corey Brecken or Supernovas, for some reason it always tells us, all right, I'm an Ardbeg, but I have a different story to tell than the 10-year. So, David, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Dr. Bill and the Whiskey Creation team achieves, I guess, that side of the story from a liquid perspective. And then, TJ, I'd love to hear from you from a cocktail perspective, some of your favorite cocktails that communicate one individual style, but maybe different takes on it, i.e. the daiquiri to margarita conversation.
Yeah, I mean, from the liquid perspective, I think we'd start by saying that, fairly obvious comment that Ardbeg's new spirit is fairly intense and knows what it is, and in that respect, it's relatively difficult to affect, to bring it into different areas and different flavor areas. It's not a spirit that is as easily affected by the art of finishing, let's say, as Glenmorangie. And whilst we'd never say we've never done finishing at Ardbeg, it's not the primary way of creating new Ardbegs. We're much more into maturation in silos and combining back together. Now, some of those maturations in silos might involve a bit of finishing here and there, but we're creating different component parts of Ardbeg with different flavors and bringing things together to create assemblages, I guess, of different final flavor profiles. And when we do that, most of the time, there is somewhere in that recipe a beating heart of something that resembles Ardbeg 10-year-old, so that everything's built around that. So Ardbeg 10 is absolutely the kind of datum point. It's where everything starts, in our minds at least. And then something like Corryvrecken, well, there's a secondary component that's aged in virgin French oak that brings all those spicy notes, all those green hatch chili pepper notes to the table. If we had just bottled that component, it would be too much. It would be too extreme. That's why there's still the beating heart kind of Ardbeg 10 style in there doing its job as well. Ugadal, likewise, there's always a component part that is Ardbeg 10. Anno, there's 3 component parts at least there, but one of them is that 10-year-old house style. And it's pretty much, with exceptions, but as a rule, general rule, that's the kind of way we play, so that things are still, like you said at the beginning, Cam, we can bring a new flavor, a new experience, but hopefully everyone still goes, but it's Ardbeg.
Yeah.
You know?
I've always kind of taken the stance that, especially in the core range, if Ardbeg 10-year-old is the tapestry, if you will, then the other whiskeys basically takes an individual or singular thread from the tapestry and runs with it. So when you follow that through line all the way back, you see that that it is clearly an Ardbeg, but it has a bit of a different story to tell to it. Yeah. So yeah, TJ, I'd love to hear from you about some of your favorite families of cocktails. I would even call them, whether it's the brown bitter stirred cocktails, the shaken cocktails in the style of the daiquiri or sour. What are your thoughts?
So recently in my own style, I've really stepped away from shaken drinks. I think I'm now in my mid-30s, so I think we call it efficiency, but in actual fact it's laziness or being mature and realizing that there's a faster route from A to B than making all that effort. So I really have started owning drinks like the old-fashioned. And one of those big things was in my previous job was, how do you get bars that aren't cocktail bars to serve cocktails? And it's really hard without having to go and buy all this equipment and rebuild your bar to having ice wells and all this prep things. Whereas in actual fact, not such an Ardbeg style, but was getting people to put cocktails on optics. There's a lot of traditional pubs in Scotland that still use optics, and sometimes they have some spare. So what you could do, so for example, this here is a single. That's a single serve of a bottled cocktail, but you could do that at a 700 milliliter and have that behind you, and you can click, and then that's your cocktail served, and it takes seconds rather than minutes. The tradition of an old-fashioned taking 5 minutes to make is something that I don't believe in. Yeah. I always joke, what's the most annoying thing about a cocktail bar? People say waiting on a drink. Yeah. No, waiting on the person in front of you getting a drink. Yeah. So how do we speed up that process?
That is true.
You're standing there and you're like, God, this guy's taking another drink. Oh, and at the end he orders a pint of Guinness or an espresso martini. Like, you should have ordered that first. Everyone was in the order around. So that kind of idea is where I really went down that route. And then when I started experimenting with 10-year-old Ardbeg specifically and pulling that one, deconstructing it. One of the drinks I'm going to make very shortly is one of your drinks, actually, that Genie's Toffee, which I think is amazing, because when you break Ardbeg 10-year-old down itself, there are so many amazing flavors that go on in there. I love this sort of nutty tone that you can pull through. So the spirit, sugar, water, and bitters, the 4 ingredients that go into making an old-fashioned. How do you swap those out and really change that drink and take it in a different direction? So, for example, in this drink, we'll talk about it later, but you added lime bitters instead of and regular bitters, Angostura, rather than, which is really unusual for that style of drink. And then using a sweetening element rather than using a sugar or a honey. And I love using honey. I think it's a great natural ingredient. In the US and Canada, maple is obviously a big sweetening element, so something you can use like that. But you using amaretto was such a great way to elevate the nutty tones that come through in Ardbeg 10-year-old. Two other ones I really, really love doing. One of them is doing a bacon fat wash, because also when I taste 10-year-old Ardbeg, I get a lot of sort of that savoury smoke that moves into a slight meatiness, that bacon that comes through. So I can either use that to make a sour, but obviously, as I say, because I've become more efficient in my 30s, I like to make a maple bacon wash old-fashioned. And as a garnish on that, I get some Parma ham. Now, David Blackmore is the most bougie brand ambassador I've ever met. So if he's never had dehydrated Parma ham as a garnish on his old-fashioned, I will be shocked. I guarantee you straight away he's going to go on the internet and buy some Parma ham and have it delivered and put it in his oven for 4 hours.
I'm going to go downstairs and dehydrate some of the Parma ham I've got.
Oh, well, you've already got it. That's the first thing you do. But you get these like real nice Parma ham crisp, which I really like.
Can we have it dusted in gold as well?
Yeah. Actually, we just make cups from gold leaf and just glue that together just for David Blackmore.
Fantastic.
And then one of the other ones I really enjoy doing is just taking a single sheet of Japanese nori. My mother's Japanese, so I've always been trying to incorporate that style of drink in. And 1 sheet of Japanese nori into a bottle of Ardbeg 10-year-old, and then making what I call a seaweed sour, so a whiskey sour down that route as well. So I'm really down the old-fashioned route, but sours are something that people are still learning. When you're a new bartender, you learn how to balance a daiquiri, you learn how to balance a sour. So how do we elevate that drink slightly? And on that Japanese element, I made a miso Manhattan as well, so a little bit of miso paste infused in. Added my sweet vermouth, added water, and then I had a full batch bottle that sat in the freezer. And literally pull it out, pour your measure, or pour your drink into a martini glass, and that's your Manhattan done in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So the style of bartending I did of late was all around about batching and efficiency and making sure that if you're in a bar, your job is to give your customer the best experience. But also your job is to pay the bills and make sure that till's getting money in. So one of those parts is making sure that we get money in that till as fast as possible. Yeah. So there's a lot of different elements that come to making drinks. It's not just about making the best drink possible. As Cam said earlier, giving your customer the best experience, and that can be giving them a drink as fast as possible. And that's where my life in batching is something I've done a lot of research in. Just don't add citrus and sugar and put it in a bottle in the fridge, please. It will wall and it will ferment and it will be horrible.
Love it. Yeah. I see we are joined by Brittany here. What's the haps over there? Do we have questions? We have comments.
What have we done? She's here to tell us off.
Yeah, you're always in trouble, but I feel like you're used to it by now. So we'll just move on to the question part. So this question actually came in a little bit before you asked TJ about like favorite cocktail families, but it does relate directly to a very famous cocktail family. And it's a question about Ardbeg 10 in a Spagliato, which I think technically if you leave the base spirit in and add sparkling wine, then it's a sparkling Negroni, I think is the technical. We'll have to check in with Anne-Louise from Campari, get back to everybody.
Someone else posted something about this that I saw earlier, right? This is in Scotland. So like, is the Spagliato making a comeback?
It is making the greatest resurgence that we've ever seen. It's like LeBron being down 3-1 in the finals last year, or in 2016, and making a comeback right now. I laugh. I'm getting a very good chuckle out of this because one of our bosses, the brand director here in the U.S., David Schifrin, sent me a message earlier, like last week, at the end of last week, and was like, "Hey, have you ever made a Spagliato with Ardbeg?" So that the call came from inside the house already. The call came from inside the house already, and so I've been sending him Spagliato memes basically all week, mover and shaker. My favorite Instagram accounts posted a Spagliato meme that I sent to him immediately. I think it definitely works. I tried it yesterday. It absolutely works. It doesn't work with the traditional recipes and like specs of the Spagliato, because with the Spagliato, it is the gin has been removed for a cava or sparkling wine. So it doesn't necessarily work to do whiskey, Campari, vermouth, as well as the sparkling wine or the cava there as well. So I did a rinse on the glass. That was maybe a quarter to a half ounce. I didn't pour it out because I like my whiskey. So yeah, it definitely still worked. It was beautiful. It was citrusy. I think it is. You definitely need an orange twist, like an orange peel, as opposed to like an orange slice or a wedge. It just kind of brings everything back up from the smoky place.
I mean, I was going to suggest that the zest is probably needed, but actually, do you then zest or spray atomize Ardbeg over the top of the drink as well and pull those aromas through?
Yeah.
It's not really hitting the volumes of what we would want, but at the same point, it is entry and bringing people into a category of a drink that they necessarily wouldn't have had before. I think choosing the right Ardbeg for that would be really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that going down that citrus wee beastie route would be really good rather than something that's too savory and dry, because you've got so much dryness going on in that drink already.
Yeah.
I also think remembering that Ardbeg is owned by a parent company that is a wine and champagne company. So if anyone should be able to make it work, it should be us.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like the verdict from our panel of experts and also David Blackmore, who's here, is that sparkling Negroni, which is leaving in the base spirit, but substituting Ardbeg for gin, maybe not as delicious as giving this an atomized spray of a wee beastie, doing a rinse, and keeping it tradish spagliato as far as liquid in the glass. And
we could stand here and lie and say, yeah, it tastes amazing, everyone make it. But actually, when it comes down to it, we are bartenders through and through as well, and we understand what balance is, and sometimes things don't work. I'll be honest, I don't like vodka in my Bloody Mary. I do like Ardbeg 10.
Mm-hmm.
I've said the same thing many times. I've completely ruined Bloody Marys for myself now, and I need to have a campaign to get at least one of the major US airlines to have Ardbeg on board, so that I can have a decent Bloody Mary on my flight now.
I mean, you can carry up to 100 ml online, so that is on board with you. So that is
True. Not legally allowed to serve yourself.
I'll ask them to. David Blackmore, in first class, they will serve you your own Ardbeg.
You know what? I'm old enough to remember before the liquid ban, and my first boss in America, when I moved to America, would bring bottles of whiskey on board and give it to the flight attendant, and they would serve him his whiskey. There you go.
I mean, in fairness, you are saving the airline money by doing that.
Exactly.
True.
So there are other parts behind it. So,
I, for one, am very pro. I'm very pro this campaign, but we do have a couple of other questions. So, is anyone who is making whiskey, like Scotch whiskey right now, this could be in Ardbeg or outside of Ardbeg, considering cocktail application, like whether current production or they're thinking about that for end product for future products? I have a feeling that these friends here have a pretty good answer for this. So thanks for asking.
I mean, I would jump in and say straight away, Ardbeg Wee Beastie. Cam was part of the team that put that whiskey to the final components of that whiskey together, precisely because we were looking at how it would play well with cocktails. Our sister brand Glenmorangie has X by Glenmorangie, which was built entirely for the idea of it. Obviously, they both have to stand up on their own two legs and still be delicious whiskeys. Otherwise, go home. There's no point. But we can take it to the next level where tick the first box, it's delicious. Now, how can we tweak this so that we know it's going to work well? With the sort of conversations we've all just been having about tweaking the balance of this cocktail and that, how can we make our whiskeys work in the best way possible? So there's two examples straight away.
And I can certify both of them are delicious on their own and in cocktails. I've had them both ways, and both of them are perfect for cocktail application, but also like just good drinking whiskey, you know?
Yeah,
there is a lot of conversation around that with whiskey production, and people are moving forward and they are thinking, so how are people drinking our whiskey then? Because it's not like the old days where people were drinking it neat or with water or with ice. People are looking at other ways to heighten it. Whiskey and tonic was trying to be a thing and it was forced, but when it comes down to it, not enough people actually like tonic, so never took off. But things like lemonade, ginger ale, those common mixers are huge now. I wish I'd bought shares in a ginger ale company a couple of years ago, because ginger ale sales are absolutely booming, and that's because whiskey as a mixer is it's a massive thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that the conversation is happening at that stage of production and blending, and what are we doing and how are we doing it, and that's what we Beastie and X were designed to do, which is great.
I would say Glenmorangie or.
In the U.S., you have Cam to thank for the Wee Beastie daiquiri being the must-serve at every Ardbeg event, because if we don't, we're going to have a riot on our hands.
Exactly. A lot more to thank Cam for than just the Ardbeg daiquiri, to be honest. We'll start there.
Well, I know we are like a little under a half hour left, and we still have some really great cocktails to show off, but one more question before I pop out of here and let y'all get back to it. How much nori are you using per bottle when you're making it?
Oh, cool. So actually all I do is I put one sheet in. So that must be, I don't know, the standard laptop screen size, 2/3 the size of that. And I literally roll it up and I just pop it in and put the lid back on, and I leave it for about 4 hours.
And does it disintegrate completely? Or?
No, you can pull it back out and you can put it in your dehydrator with your Parma ham. And then you get whiskey infused nori as well, and do it in the reverse.
That is great.
Hamon Iberico, thank you very much. Parma.
And it's amazing how it adds this. I guess we talk about umami, right? This Moorish idea behind it. That's what whiskey doesn't miss that. But when you add it in, you go, "Whoa, this is really serious." And it only works with certain whiskeys. I mean, you need a seaside whiskey to make it work. When you smell Ardbegs, I smell the pier, standing on the pier. And obviously, I've been there, so my mind goes there, and I'm lucky like that. But
TJ, question for you about nori. Is it a specific type of seaweed, or can it be made with various types? Do you know the details on nori? Because I'm immediately thinking Isla nori.
Thanks for putting me on the spot. I'll be honest, as far as I'm aware, that they use a few different types that go into it, but I don't think that they have the right seaweed around Isla to do that. But I will research this and I will find out, because it's easy to find out what seaweed is available around Isla and actually.
It would be epic, right?
That would be.
I mean, the world is getting a smaller place by the internet, so why don't we get creative and do something?
Yeah. That'd be absolutely.
We've done whiskey cured salmon before, right? Everyone's done whiskey cured salmon. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we elevate that experience and add more in and do more with it? So I will find out more information.
Sea salt.
Yeah.
Peat smoked sea salt's pretty interesting as well.
Exactly. So, but yeah, one sheet, throw that in, take it back out. If you want, you can dehydrate it again. I tend to just eat it as it is because it's really punchy and I like nori, and it's a bit soggy, but I'm fine with it. I'm eating worse.
It's in Ardbeg. Of course you're okay with it.
Well, we're all here for an easy infusion, and especially one that sounds that delicious. So thanks for sharing your recipe with us. But I see all of those bottles lined up, and I'm also looking at the clock. So I'm not going to take up any more time right now because I have my notebook so that I can have your recipes. I'm stealing from you as we speak, so I'm ready to get to it.
I love it. I love it. Well, TJ, since you're all set up there, why don't you rock out your first cocktail, which we'd love to hear a little bit about.
I love how you're telling me that I'm going to speak about it when it's your drink that I'm presenting.
I love it. Well, I mean, you've got the setup for the Genie's Toffee. Just
I actually keep it as a batch on the bar in the head office now.
Love that.
So like I always have a batch bottles of it because it's shelf stable for months, and I can pull it out. Give me 1 second. I'll show you what we actually did.
Absolutely. So as he's grabbing that, I will mention that this cocktail was created for Ardbeg, or for Planet Ardbeg, which is one of the new platforms that Ardbeg will be rolling out very soon here. So those are the labels there.
Yeah, so these are the labels that we had made, and this was basically the launch of Planet Ardbeg, the new marketing campaign for Ardbeg, internally within the Glenmorangie company, based in Scotland. There's 286 employees, so I was tasked on making 286 bottled cocktails. I made 300, and apparently that wasn't enough, so that's why I've got some extras. But that's what that drink ends up like. And we sent them all out to all the employees, so Jeannie's Toffee was sent out to absolutely everyone, and everyone's received them, and they've all enjoyed this amazing drink. So it's real simple. I love it because it takes an old drink as an old fashioned and modernizes it and moves it into the new world. So forgive me if my recipe is too Scottish for you, Cam, because of licensing laws that we have here. But simply, I started off with 40 milliliters of Ardbeg 10-year-old. And then I'm grabbing here just a quick 10 milliliters of a nice amaretto. Real simple, really easy, a great element. I think an amaretto sour is one of my absolutely favorite drinks. And I think that Ardbeg and amaretto, that nuttiness, throw that in a sour, really moves that drink into the next realm, which is something that's really, really good. This one here is Scrappy's Lime Bitters, which actually I'd never tried before. It's not really like a popular ingredient in the UK, but when I tried it, I went, wow, this is like really zesty for being bitters. It's fresh. It's got this real nice herbaceous nip behind it, so I totally understand why. So just 2 dots of that. And I was really happy to see that my favourite bitters, there's Angostura in it as well. There's Angostura in your recipe? There isn't there?
Yep.
It's chocolate.
Yeah, it was chocolate, and I apologize.
It was chocolate.
The original. Yeah. Big fan of Scrappy's bitters, call it hometown pledge there, but they're also from Seattle. So I've known those gents for a long time.
That's really cool. I really like that.
They're a valued sponsor of Camp Runamuck and Brown and Balance. There's my plug.
Absolutely. And the two of us together do beautiful things. Yeah.
So that one there was just another two large dots, or a big large dash of Fee Brothers chocolate bitters. Mm-hmm. And then there was that real cool element that I love adding, which is just the tiniest pinch of salt.
Yes.
And that's exactly it. But you were using black sea salt in yours, right?
Yeah. Originally, I had black sea salt, but any salt will do. It's more flavor driven.
So what I've actually done here is I've added all the ingredients to my tin. I don't use mixing glasses because I always break them. So I'm now banned from using those. But what I tend to do is, because I'm adding something like salt in, if I'm adding honey or something, I'll always add my ingredients and make sure that I give them a little stir and let that sort of dissolve first. If you add that ice in there, it's going to all become freezing cold and nothing's going to dissolve. So it's really important you start off with that. And then all I'm going to do is fill this full of ice and give it a real nice stir. And I think that this is one of the best rituals when it comes to bartending, is stirring an old-fashioned, because it takes that bit of time to make sure that you get it to the absolute perfect dilution. Nobody wants an over-diluted old-fashioned. Sure. And I don't mind an old-fashioned that's been under-diluted. I mean, we work in the drinks industry, Cam, right? So we're quite used to tasting like neat spirits and cask strengths and things that are higher ABV. But if you're a bartender out there and you're used to having a shot of tequila behind the bar on a Friday night, don't forget that your customers don't have the same palate as you. So when you're creating these drinks, it's always a good idea to have one of your colleagues taste this. But if you've got a regular in the bar, someone that you get on well with, who comes in and say, "Hey, I just made this drink, want to have a try?" And they'll give you an honest opinion if it's too sweet, too sour, or of course, if it's too boozy. Too boozy, we always think that's a really, really good thing, and then you drink the drink and it's just not enjoyable. That's the reason why we drink drinks, is to enjoy ourselves, right? So simple there. Stirred that for just about a minute or so. And all I'm going to do is just pour that lovely into my glass. And then I'm going to top that up with some ice again. Did you have a garnish on this originally, Kat?
Originally, it had a lemon. It had a lemon twist.
I don't have lemon. Can I use orange?
Absolutely. Knock yourself out, please. No. The cocktail, one of the things I love about the cocktail actually is how it maintains this really kind of light auric gold, as we call it, with Ardbeg. One of the things I love about it is just when you're holding that up, it's just so incredibly light in coloration, but it's so rich in texture, in mouthfeel, and then an explosive flavor profile as well.
And that's it there. That's Jeannie's Toffee,
Love
which
it.
I think, as far as drinks go, I'm not saying that that's just because it's excellently made by myself, and obviously with Cameron's amazing directions, but soon on the nose, that zest is so vibrant, it brings the whole drink up the way. And I think we battle with peated whiskies they go too dark and too deep too easily because we go into those dark flavors because that's where they sit. But actually using things like a zest or a spritz, or using, for example, I hate using bitters bottles. A long time ago, I was working in a really, really nice cocktail bar, and we had to wear white shirts and black skinny ties. And every single time you picked up a bottle of Angostura bitters and dashed it in, you go nowhere near your shirt, put the lid back on, look down, and there was always an Angostura bitters dot on yourself. So I started buying these really, really cool atomizer bottles. So you could just, like a little travel perfume bottle, and pouring it in, because you could pop the lid off an Angostura bitters. Yeah. And just 2 squirts was the same as 1 dot. So just in the glass, saves your shirt. The bitters aroma comes more vibrant because you've added air into that bitters where it's opened up. So that kind of idea is how I always do it. But that there, Jeannie's Toffee.
That sounds delicious. One of my favorite things about Angostura bitters as well is ordering shots of Angostura bitters at the airport and watching the bartender freak out and try to just repeatedly. I'm like, the lid, the top comes off. You can just take the top off and you can just pour a little bit of it.
Why would you do that to people, man? Why would you do that to people?
I've got a cruel streak there as well. But
don't get me wrong. I remember we used to have bitter, like fancy bitters bottles. Mm-hmm. And I asked the guy, and I didn't know this, I didn't mean it, but I said, can you just fill the bitters bottles? And I didn't tell him until the end, which was a bit mean, but he stood there and went,
"Yep, exactly."
Into this bit, and I went up him at the end. I just got my wine key.
Yeah.
And I popped it out, and he was like, "Are you joking? You couldn't tell me that at the beginning." I thought, well, you have to learn somehow.
Exactly. You gotta learn sometime,
But that man, that is a delicious drink. That Jeannie's Toffee, I think it's so cool.
I'm loving.
You could switch the bitters out for what you have in your bar as well. I think would work really, really well. I think that a lot of bars have something around like chocolate, but even something like walnut or black. But whiskey barrel bitters would work really well. I think whiskey barrel is a bit too clove heavy for some people, but I quite like it. And that citrus, if you don't have lime, you could always use something like lemon or orange would probably work as well if you've got that in your bar. But if you get the chance, this is the drink, because I was really amazed by how this drink worked together. Yeah. The other one I want to swap it out is when it comes into season. Scottish rhubarb is fantastic.
Oh.
So how would I then maybe stew up some rhubarb and then infuse that into my Ardbeg 10-year-old as well, and then getting that sweet sour element in there, and then making the drink through there around about April, May when rhubarb comes into season, because I'm a huge rhubarb fan. So if I get a chance to put it in drinks, I'm going to put it there.
100%. You also touched on something that from a liquid profile is really interesting with Ardbeg. For years now, Ardbeg has spoken about one of the things that we try to achieve with all of the whiskeys from the distillery is the Peaty paradox. So this juxtaposition between, yes, being incredibly and intensely peated, the most heavily peated whiskey in regular production, right? But then also not steering or driving too far into that dark and murky element that people associate with heavily peated whiskeys. Oftentimes that can be viewed as an intimidating category because of the flavor profile, the assumed flavor profile. So with Ardbeg, part of what makes us very different from any of the other distilleries on Islay, and then also anybody else making heavily peated whiskey in the world, is two things. First and foremost, a very short heads run. Ardbeg is really only on heads for about 15 minutes before we start collecting heart of the spirit. So that means that we're collecting a lot of light and very kind of ethereal aromatics, esters, and organic compounds as they start to blow off through the still. So we're collecting heart very, very early in our distillation run. Then secondly, we compound that by utilizing and by being the only heavily peated whiskey distillery that's using a purifier in regular production as well. So that purifier allows us to grab pieces of the distillate and kind of polish it off. So if you were to say that Ardbeg is 2 and a bit times distilled, you'd absolutely be correct. And so this is where you get this balance and this duality of the spirit between, yes, being incredibly intensely smoky, but then also being one that is very light and shows a refinement to it as well, as how I like to describe that.
I mean, you can talk about the big three on Islay, right? And they're all on the same road. You have come out of Port Ellen, and then you hit Laphroaig, then you hit Lagavulin, then you hit Ardbeg. And all three of them are really, really different. You know, Lagavulin's really, really oily. Yes. I find Laphroaig a bit, I was going to say coarse, but it kind of jiggles itself from flavor to flavor. And then you've got Ardbeg, which is this like fresh and vibrant peat. Yeah, it's like how do they all come from the same maltings, which we'll talk about. You know, it's fine. It's what happens. It's production. It's economies of scale. But how do these three different distilleries have three very, very different flavor profiles, and why? You know, when you look at Lagavulin's distillation is really long and burns a lot of that back, like you know, before the tails come out and faint. You know. Whereas when you look at, say, Ardbeg, as Cam said, it starts collecting really, really early, so you get those light aromatic flavors. I also think that there's almost sometimes this floral tone in a few aspects, and that's definitely where that comes from. Yes. And then the purifier, which is the part that keeps the distillation process going round and round, is such an amazing aspect, and it's weird how some people frown upon them, but in actual fact, what it does is it changes our whiskey to being so much more unique. And I think the flavor profiles of what we have are so much more vast, and that's down to the distillery production.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that's a really interesting point as well in terms of talkings about a distillery, about a whiskey's provenance in DNA is developed at the distillery, not necessarily at the point of origin of the grains. You know, as you've mentioned, you know, the three Kildalton trio, as they're called, the big three on Islay, all take malting from the exact same place, from Port Ellen malting facility. 7 of the 9 distilleries on the island take malted barley from that same facility as well. But those 7 of the 9 distilleries that take their malted barley from Port Ellen, I would say they all make very different styles of single malt from one another. So the provenance in DNA of a whiskey is developed not necessarily at the level of where the grain is grown, but the inherent processes and steps and operations that make that distillery unique as well. I'd also say that, you know, there is one place in which you can use the term like terroir or provenance as well, outside of the distillery, would be where the peat comes from, right? So Islay peat is incredibly rich in phenol, has more phenol than any other peat except for Orkney. Orkney's kind of thumbprint in DNA of their phenolics in their peat bog is eerily similar to what happens on Islay as well. But that's another place where you do get to have a conversation. And one of the things that you mentioned, and you've showed us as well by using a little bit of sea salt in the cocktail as well, is that's actually where the salt and the briny element of heavily peated whiskey starts to kind of manifest itself. And that's also one of the ways that, I don't like to paint a world of absolutes, but as a rule of thumb, if I'm smelling, a briny and a saltiness, I'm going to assume that whiskey is probably peated. There are some category breakers, like Old Pulteney is an incredibly briny whiskey that doesn't necessarily have peat to it. But for the most part, when I'm smelling an element of brine or salinity, that's one of the key kind of signatures of a heavily peated whiskey there. So I love that you used it in the actual cocktail as well there.
What I'm really interested to know is, David, you poured a dram at the beginning of this, but you didn't tell us what it was.
In here, Corryvreckan.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Absolutely, Corryvreckan. And I took myself off camera because I didn't want to embarrass myself on camera, but I went and grabbed everything, and I attempted to make the cocktail. I didn't have a rocks glass, so here it is, and yeah, pretty good. Not as good as yours, I'm sure, because I'm just not that talented at making cocktails, but not bad.
David, you're very talented in many other ways, and your extensive knowledge of our portfolio is the reason why you're here.
Wonderful, and now I know why.
Just to let you know, it's not for your golden chat, your good looks. It's just for your knowledge.
I love it.
I love you. Now I'm going to go and throw a sheet of nori into a bottle of Ardbeg and get back to you.
I think it's a really, really fun thing to do. And what I actually did before was I took that sheet of nori, dried it out, and then blended it up, and then had it in that. Like when you go to Starbucks or like a coffee shop, and they give you that sprinkling on the cappuccino.
Yeah.
So I did that on top with some nori that we blended up. So nothing went to waste, and it was actually used. And you can put some cool designs on there as well. I'd like to get you get those the designs you put on top that have like an Ardbeg A cut, and then you could actually do a sprinkle on top.
Now Cam and I may have a couple of those that we don't need. Hey Cam,
there's a reason why I said it on camera.
I think I even have one of Shorty, our mascot. Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely. Now that I've found them, I've got a ton of them right here. So this is 40 is right here.
Yeah, got that. Nice.
Our canine, and then we've got the Ardbeg A, the roundel as well.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? It's really, really cool.
Love using those for cocktails as well. Nori is such an interesting. I love how this is now turned into Nori chat. Which I'm totally fine with. But during the pandemic, I remember making a series of at-home like cocktail videos. And one of the cocktails that I made, I called the Corryvreckan Highball. So it was Ardbeg Corryvreckan infused with nori, and then was done with like a sparkling. Oh my goodness! It was a sparkling yuzu coconut water. Was what I used to elongate that cocktail, and it was delicious. So,
first and foremost, Corryvreckan is absolutely outrageous. I love that.
Well done, sir. Well done, sir. The
sparkling yuzu and coconut. That's that nutty element that comes through again, and that citrus, and to move that to yuzu is really cool. And that drink sounds awesome. I'm gonna have to go and find me some yuzu and coconut soda and make that ASAP. Yeah,
it's delicious. Well, speaking of other cocktails, I'd love to make a cocktail as well because I feel like I'm the only one without a drink. Did I have a little bit of Ardbeg at the beginning of the conversation? Yes, but a little bit is definitely not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself a little cocktail as well. This is something that I've been working on in just at home here over the last couple of days, trying to get ready for the winter season, working on cocktails that are, I guess, still fruit forward, but then also have some like a level of comfort to them as well. And that's an interesting thread to kind of, or a needle to try to thread there, because it can be quite difficult when we start thinking about this time of year. We immediately start thinking about fall flavors. Things like pumpkin spice becomes all of the rave. If I have pumpkin spice on my, if I have to see that on my Instagram one more time, I'm going to lose it. just going to lose.
I agree. No more pumpkin spice, please.
Exactly. No more pumpkin spice, please, for the love of God. So one of the cocktails that I've been playing around with, or one of the ingredients that I've been playing around with, is actually pomegranate, fresh pomegranate. Let's see.
Yes.
Yeah. So
love that.
Pomegranate is one of my favorite ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and make a pretty interesting cocktail. We'll get this lemon there. I loved how you mentioned that you are a man of leisure there, TJ, and also don't love shaking cocktails. I feel quite similarly. In my spare time now, I want my drink as quickly as I can possibly get it. So pre-batching is pretty important to me. One of the interesting things that I see and have seen over the past few years is that people are now no longer afraid to use little tiny amounts of citrus in stirred cocktails. Because with stirred cocktails, you are achieving and you're able to keep a textural element to the whiskey cocktail that you may lose if you are forcing aeration by stirring, right? So stirred cocktails generally tend to sit and lay down a little bit more on the palate, which is one of the reasons I love them during this time of year, because it's like a weighted, cozy blanket, as opposed to during the summertime when I want a shaken cocktail, which is going to be really bright and super vibrant. So I've gone ahead and I've squeezed about 1/4 ounce of lemon juice down into the bottom of the glass here. I'll go ahead and grab my Ardbeg now as well. I'll also pull for Ardbeg 10-year-old. You used about 40 mLs. I'm going to use basically the same, about 1.5 ounces there as well. I'm going to come behind that with pomegranate juice.
I love pomegranate juice. Grenadine is one of my favorite ingredients on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. Grenadine is such a cool ingredient as well there. And then I'll use about 10 mLs of a really rich Demerara that I made at home here.
That's something I really agree with is brown spirits, brown sugar, white spirits, white sugar.
Absolutely.
I'm fed up with people making me an old fashioned with gum.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, that's gross.
yeah, that's gross.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It's always, even for me as the kind of cocktail enthusiast novice who's very much more the whiskey guy. When I go to a bar and someone makes me a cocktail with gum, I just think, well, I could have done that at home.
Yeah,
I could have done better than that at home, actually.
Mm-hmm. So, interesting. Just before you go into that, Spagliato has apparently bounced back because this is in the chat. There was an interview with some cast from the House of Dragon like a week or two ago, I think is what they said. Oh, yeah. And also there's another one said, somebody stop me before I throw Ardbeg into an ISI to carbonate for the Scotch Spagliato. So it's like throw all the ingredients in, all sparkling. Do this. I've got an ISI whipper here. I might do it straight away.
Let's do it. That's amazing.
That's so good. I love those ISIs. We used to use those for ridiculous purposes. I'll never forget. We had barrel rested a bunch of Mountain Dew, the soda Mountain Dew, for about a month and a half, and we made we basically made this cocktail that had Mountain Dew, single malt, lemon juice, and what was it? It was like an apple liqueur as well, and then we recarbonated it with the Mountain Dew. It was. I
feel like you're going to upset two types of people there: the whiskey diehards and the Mountain Dew diehards.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm never going to let you give me abuse anymore for my Bucky Brecken job. If you're using Mountain Dew.
That Bucky Brecken is something I do not want to try. But please,
moving swiftly on, guys. I have found a Scottish supplier of Nori.
Love it.
Interesting.
So I'll send you the details, TJ.
Thank you very much. Whilst we're here, would you like to explain that Bucky Brecken while you were going?
Probably not the best idea.
No, okay. For those of you that have Google or Yahoo or whatever, you could maybe Google something called Buckfast and figure that one out itself.
Yes, 50-50. 50-50.
Cam, the color on that drink looks amazing.
Yeah, it is a very, very beautiful, kind of vibrant, almost pinkish heat to it. Really pretty.
Beautiful.
Really awesome coloration of the cocktail. On the nose, the Ardbeg still absolutely sings through the citrus elements. I love pomegranate because it's not that it's super citrusy, but pomegranate does have this really beautiful kind of like high note to it that pairs.
There's acidity in pomegranate, right? So that's why you don't have to use too much of your citrus. Exactly. What I really like what you said there was when you pick it up, you can still smell Ardbeg. And I think that's what's great about using peated whiskies and Ardbeg in cocktails is, we always, as if you're doing competitions, we want to talk about how the spirit is the hero. It's the backbone. You want to be able to taste that. And it's so easy to do that with peated whiskies. You can throw so many other flavors on top of there, like pomegranate or amaretto or, citrus sodas or your yuzu and coconut, right? And you're still going to be able to taste that whole entire essence of Isla in that drink. And I think that's what's awesome. Pina coladas don't taste of rum that much, right?
Yeah.
Put Ardbeg in there and you're in a real good spot because that peat's going to punch through real well.
And Ardbeg Pina colada is actually pretty decent.
It's very delicious, especially with Ardbeg Anno as well. With Anno.
Yeah, you're right there. Anno seems to work. I didn't, when you first made it with Anno, I couldn't envision it until I tasted it. It just seemed like it wouldn't work, but it absolutely did.
Yeah.
Next time you're over, I'll make you a Scottish pina colada using sea buckthorn. That's the one.
Let's do it. I am in it. David, book our flights immediately.
So I'm in a couple of weeks. So
yeah, David, book our flights.
Yeah, Brittany says book all of our flights.
TJ, we'll send them some photos of us drinking them. How about that?
You people see this. I have to talk to this man every day. You see this, right? This is how much I believe in the Scotch whiskey diploma program. Okay.
I'm not going to get invited back because David's on here.
No, you're going to start getting invited instead of David. That's what we're going to do for 2023 season of Classics.
I can already see what's going to happen. I'm going to be banished to be running a small hotel on the island of Islay for the rest of the time.
Yeah, in Bowmore.
Oh, nice.
You have the perfect personality for like front desk hotel Isla. Like I can see it. I can see it all.
I can see him as a baggage handler.
Oh, great! Here we go.
So before we kind of start to wrap up here, I do want to say some of the people are mildly incensed at your hatred of pumpkin spice. I'm not incensed. I'm mostly mildly afraid, and that's because there's one way I found out they make pumpkin spice cotton candy, and that's because the person who's making cotton candy for the Glenmore and TJ dinner at Camp Runnemuck Alumni Weekend is going to be making some. So you're welcome, and I am sorry. And
right, there's a challenge, guys. Pumpkin spiced Ardbeg. Make it good. Do it.
You can release it as like a fall pack with the Nori Brecken. It'll be and pumpkin spice. People will be super confused, but like based on Ardbeg fandom, really into it. So like, I don't think there's any problem with that.
I mean, you were always looking at tapping into new demographics, and the pumpkin spice drinker is probably the pumpkin spice latte drinker is probably not the traditional Ardbeg drinker. So actually, it's worth experimenting on. So Cam, over to you. Good luck.
I love it. All right, I'm on the case.
I love watching Cam's face as we discuss this, and I want to know who's responsible for telling Dr. Bill.
Well, guys, funnily enough, about a decade ago, I actually bacon fat washed a bottle of Ardbeg 10 at home. And Lumsden actually came around my house. It's amazing. What an honor. I had to go out and rent a red carpet, the whole thing, polish the door handles. It was amazing. So I decided it was the perfect opportunity to let him taste my bacon fat washed bottle of Ardbeg. I just poured it on the rocks and let him have a sniff. He had a little sip and he had this kind of reflex action and he looked up like that and straight in the eyes, he said to me, "What the bleep have you done to my Ardbeg?"
Well, then he's going to love our pumpkin spice and nori brecken O&D combo pack. So
in fairness, possibly things have moved on because I was with Dr. Bill last night and we were drinking Ugadal old fashions. So
yes, no, he's definitely moved on, and I think there's been a learning curve for both him and I in the field of.
We'll revisit the bacon, and like we say, we'll put it in the pack with the nori brecken, the pumpkin spice, the bacon. We'll do them all, and let's see how we go.
Honestly, I really hope Jillian never sees this, but Dr. Bill as well. But I can't wait for our fall pack. That is our bacon, pumpkin spice, and nori brecken combo pack coming to in caps in off-premise accounts everywhere. O&D 2023.
You heard it here first.
I didn't hear this. Is this meeting being recorded?
He's on something called Facebook or something.
Yeah, great. So anyone out there who's recording that, just make sure you post it, and the more people who believe it, the more people it might happen. Don't do that, please don't.
I'm gonna have to start a puppet account as Cam and go into the Ardbeg committee groups and be like, "This is what's coming your way. Get ready for it." Really, just cause some confusion.
Are you going to catfish Ardbeg? Is that what you're doing?
I kind of already am.
Hey guys, if we really want to mess with them, let's put in a few fake label approvals into the US label approval system, and then they'll think they're real.
Yeah, I love that.
Let's leave the TTB.
I don't want part of this. I work in the head office. I don't want part of this.
Look, when we get to the TTB, we've gone too far. That is not a game I want to play.
They don't mind. They're happy to take the money for the labels.
Well, are there any more real cocktails with products that exist that we'll be covering today? Or are we going to leave people on this fully unhinged note for the end of Scotch Whiskey Diploma late summer 2022?
I think we're gonna leave them with a watch this space and let's see what happens. We've talked some really, really cool drinks actually. Cam pulling out pomegranate's a real interesting flavor, something I love. I've never done anything with Ardbeg and pomegranate yet, so that's gonna be my next direction. How do we go down that route? What do we do? Which is super cool. But no, it's been great. Thanks so much for having me. It's only 8:15 here, so I feel like I've got loads of time. Which is great, but thanks very much for having me, and all the way from Edinburgh, where it's now very, very dark.
Well, we appreciate you spending your evening with us, making delicious cocktails and dealing with our nonsense. So thank you for coming on the show. I know we have to get off the internet because we're over our time, but I'm very sad to see this end. To start once again our last live class for this round of Scotch Whiskey Diploma, sponsored by Ardbeg. The partnership between Ardbeg, Portland Cocktail Week, and the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy to bring this program to life is just such a joy to be a part of. And the education is so valuable between what the Ardbeg team provides for us here and in the drop-in jams and what the Edinburgh Whiskey Academy provides for the students every Monday. We're all working hard to see this program come back next year. So keep your eyes out. Hopefully we'll be sending you an application so that you can be one of the next 50 students to receive your Scotch Whiskey Diploma from the Scottish Qualifications Authority, because it is official and fancy. To all of the folks who were a part of this round, you have worked so hard and you've done such a good job. And I'm so excited to see you post about getting your diplomas. Well earned, well deserved. So make yourself one of the cocktails that TJ and Cam and David put Ardbeg in a cup. So that's also an acceptable drink to reward yourself and prepare for your final assessments. And with that, make sure you follow all of these lovely people on Instagram because they're cool and they post cool things about Ardbeg related stuff. So Glenmo and Ardbeg David, Ardbeg Cam, and then it's TJ on tap. I can't believe I almost forgot that one. I used to work at
It's right there now. You can see it all right.
And then make sure you follow us at Portland Cocktail Week over on Instagram. You can always find out what we're up to next over there. And that'll be a good space to watch for Scotch Whiskey Diploma 2023 applications. Also, make sure you like this class. You loved this class. We know you did because it was hilarious and we got real weird at the end, but somehow we brought it back. So make sure you drop some love in the comments, hit that like button, hit that love button. I see someone hit a laughy button. I agree. This was hilarious and fun. And if you are a YouTube person, YouTube is your preferred platform to view. Go over to youtube.com/PDXCW and subscribe. We would love to have you as one of our subscribers so that you can watch new classes like this one next year. And Cam, David, I would be really sad, but I will see you in Portland IRL because we still have more education for the people this year. And we've got some fun, spooky, costumey stuff cooking up for Camp Run-A-Muck Alumni Weekend. So those of you who are joining us there, we can't wait to see you. Guys, thank you so much for everything. And everybody have a really good Wednesday.
Love it. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good night. Good luck.